sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till...
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something pretty interesting, I think. It's a fascinating legal and political question that we're going to be jumping right into. So buckle up, everybody.
Exactly.
Can former President Trump's claim that former President Biden's preemptive pardons are void simply because they were signed with an autopen? Does that hold any water?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question we're looking at, right?
Okay.
We're looking at the basis for that assertion, the legal basis,
right,
or the potential lack thereof.
Exactly.
And we're basing our exploration today on a news article that came out recently that details both Trump's statements,
right,
and the initial expert reactions to his argument.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to set the stage a little bit for our listeners. Remind everyone that in the final days of his presidency, Biden issued preemptive pardons to a number of individuals who, had found themselves in the crosshairs of potential Trump investigations. And we're talking about figures like members of the House January 6th Select Committee.
Big names.
Retired General Mark Milley.
Yes.
Former NIAID Director Anthony Fauci.
Yep.
So some very prominent figures.
Absolutely.
And you know what we're really trying to do in this deep dive is to really dissect Trump's claim and try to understand, is there any legal foundation to the idea that using an autopen,
right,
which is essentially a machine that replicates a signature,
yes,
invalidates a presidential pardon?
Right. And I think more broadly, what could the implications be if this kind of challenge,
right,
gets any traction?
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about it, because it's not just a sort of one-off claim. It has this much broader implications, potentially.
Yeah. Like fun.
So let's get right to it. What did Trump actually say?
Right to the heart of it.
Yeah.
To the heart of it.
What's the claim?
So on his Truth Social platform, Trump declared Biden's pardons, quote, void, vacant, and of no further force or effect.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty strong language there.
Yeah, no messing around.
No messing around.
And it seems like the crux of his argument
right,
is that because these pardons were, quote, done by autopen,
right,
that they somehow weren't properly considered or approved by Biden himself.
Yeah, and it's that kind of speculative nature of that assertion, That's what's really intriguing here.
Yeah.
He goes on further to suggest, without really any evidence, that members of the January 6th committee themselves were, quote, probably responsible for these Autopen-Signed documents being issued on their behalf.
I see.
So it kind of implies this scenario where, pardons were granted without the president's full knowledge or consent.
That's a pretty big insinuation.
It is.
It really does make you wonder if that's even possible. Could the recipients of these pardons have somehow orchestrated their own clemency without the president knowing?
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Well, let's go to the legal minds. What are the experts saying?
So the early reactions from legal experts seem to be pretty dismissive, I'd say.
Okay.
Jeffrey Crouch, who's an expert on federal executive clemency at American University, makes this really critical point right off the bat.
Nope.
He says valid presidential pardons are final.
Okay.
And importantly, he directly contradicts Trump's premise by stating that other presidents have used an autopen to grant pardons.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that right away kind of undercuts the idea that this is some novel or illegitimate practice by Biden.
Yeah, or some kind of sneaky
door thing. And it's also worth noting that the finality of those pardons, it's really deeply rooted in the Constitution's of pardon power to the president. And courts have historically treated that authority with a lot of deference.
I see.
Challenges to pardons are actually quite rare. And they typically face a very high legal hurdle.
And usually they focus on allegations of fraud or corruption. In the granting of the pardon itself.
Right.
Not the specific method used to sign the document.
That's a crucial distinction.
It is.
Yeah, so it's not so much about the how, it's about the what.
Exactly. It's about the decision itself.
Okay. And Kimberly Wheel, a law professor at the University of Baltimore, seems to be on the same page.
Yeah, she seems to agree.
She called Trump's argument an unlikely winner in any legal challenge.
Right.
And she had this really insightful comment, I thought. She said, there's no magic in the mechanism of a pardon. It really drives home that point that the legal validity really rests on the presidential decision itself, not the tool that's used for the signature.
Right. The Autopen is just a tool.
Exactly.
It's not some magic wand that changes the nature of the pardon.
Right. And so her point really underscores that
the
heart of a pardon is the president's deliberate act of granting clemency. But she brings up a really interesting point about a possible strategic dimension to Trump's challenge.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle.
Even if it's not legally sound.
Right. So even if Trump's efforts to invalidate these pardons ultimately fail, just the act of targeting these people could be enough.
Oh, wow.
To subject them to expensive and emotionally draining legal battles.
Oh, I see what you mean.
As Will put it, the damage to some degree will already have been done.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So regardless of the, ultimate legal outcome.
Right.
This could still be used as a tactic to harass and intimidate political adversaries.
Yeah, it's almost like weaponizing the legal process itself.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, just to create trouble for someone, even if you don't actually win.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty Machiavellian.
It is.
So the legal basis might be shaky, but the strategy could be to just tie people up in court.
Yeah, create headaches for support.
Well, okay, so let's step back for a moment and think about why Biden issued these preemptive pardons in the first place.
Right. What was his goal?
What was his reasoning? Yeah, what was the rationale?
Yeah, well, Biden's public statements at the time were pretty clear.
Okay.
He explicitly said that these pardons shouldn't be seen as any kind of admission of wrongdoing by the people receiving them.
Right.
Instead, he framed them as a necessary shield against politically motivated attacks, and specifically from former President Trump.
Okay.
He named names.
Okay.
Members of the January 6th committee, General Milley Anthony Fauci, and even members of Fauci's family.
Wow.
And he said that these potential attacks were driven, quote, solely by a desire to hurt me.
So basically, he was trying to protect these people from what he perceived as potential future political retribution.
Exactly.
Okay. So what has been the reaction to Trump's claim that these pardons are null and void?
Well, as you might expect.
Yeah.
The people who were targeted by Trump
and
then pardoned by Biden have rejected these claims pretty strongly.
Okay.
Representative Benny Thompson, who was the chair of the January 6th committee, didn't mince words.
Okay.
He said that Trump's, quote, latest midnight rant has no basis in reality.
Okay.
And then he offered a really sharp counterpoint.
What was that?
He reminded everyone that Trump himself, quote, raced to pardon those who beat the police, who protected American democracy that day as one of his first official acts after returning to the White House.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful parallel that he's drawing there.
Yeah, it really highlights the contrasting uses of pardon power.
Yeah, it's really interesting how pardon power is used so differently by different presidents.
It's a powerful tool.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier the precedent for Autopen use.
Yeah.
For presidential signatures.
Right.
Can we dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. The news article we're looking at actually points to this really relevant piece of history.
Okay.
A 2005 memorandum opinion from the Bush Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel.
Okay.
The OLC.
Okay.
And this memo specifically looked at the legality of using an autopen for a president to sign bills into law.
I see.
And the OLC concluded that it was permissible for the president to direct a subordinate to use an autopen to affix their signature to a bill, but only after the president had made the decision to approve and sign that bill.
Okay, so the decision to sign itself has to be the president's.
Yes.
And the autopen is just a tool for the act of signing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about delegating the
process.
The mechanics of it.
Yeah.
Not the actual presidential prerogative.
Not the decision-making.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's just like a fancy stamp.
Basically, yeah.
Oh.
The OLC memo is really clear about that point.
Okay.
The authority in the decision-making remains with the president.
Okay.
The autopen is just the way that decision gets carried out.
So this really kind of undermines Trump's argument. Yeah, it suggests that using an autopen for these kinds of signatures isn't some crazy, unprecedented thing.
Right, it's not.
Yeah.
As long as the underlying decision is made by the president.
It's coming from the president themselves.
Exactly.
So that begs the question, why is Trump raising this issue now?
Yeah, I mean...
What's his game?
What's the bigger objective?
Yeah, what's the strategy?
It seems like it might go back to that earlier point about testing the boundaries of executive power.
Oh, okay.
So, regardless of the strength of his argument legally,
right,
you could see this claim as him probing the limits of presidential authority.
Interesting.
And maybe even setting the stage for future legal battles with his political opponents.
I see.
The article even suggests that there could be a, quote-unquote, legal showdown.
Wow.
So it's a way of keeping these issues front and center.
Right.
And, potentially casting doubt on the actions taken by his successor.
So maybe it's not even really about these specific pardons.
Right. Could be part of a
broader strategy to challenge, and kind of delegitimize actions taken during Biden's presidency that he disagrees with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So by focusing on this kind of technicality, like the Autopen,
right,
even if legally it's not a very strong argument,
right,
he's creating this narrative of impropriety.
Yeah.
And maybe laying the groundwork for future legal challenges.
Yeah. And, just by injecting this uncertainty,
right,
he's creating potential legal hurdles.
Headaches.
For his opponents down the line.
Yeah, just making life difficult.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap here for our listeners.
Yeah.
Trump is claiming that Biden's preemptive pardons are invalid.
Right.
Because of this Autopen thing.
Yep.
He's suggesting that Biden maybe wasn't even fully aware of these actions or didn't approve them.
Right.
But legal experts are saying, not so fast.
Yeah, they largely disagree.
They're emphasizing that valid pardons are final. And there's this historical precedent for presidents using Autopens.
For sure.
And even if Trump's legal challenge doesn't succeed,
right,
the fact that he's pursuing it could create a lot of problems.
Headaches.
Yeah.
Headaches for the people who received those pardons.
And Biden's whole point in issuing these pardons was to protect these people from what he saw as these political attacks.
Right. And, the folks who got pardoned have been pretty dismissive of Trump's claims.
Yeah, they're not buying it.
Not buying it.
And that 2005 OLC memo really seems to back up the idea that using an Autopen for these signatures is legal.
Right.
As long as it's the president making the decision.
As long as the decision's coming from the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems like this is just another example of Trump kind of pushing the boundaries.
Testing the limits.
Testing the limits of his executive power.
Yeah, and maybe setting the stage for future legal battles.
It never ends, does it?
It seems not.
So for everyone listening out there, think about this.
Yeah. We've got historical acceptance of Autopens for presidential signatures.
Right.
We've got this legal consensus on the finality of pardons.
Yep.
What does this situation tell us about how presidential transitions of power are understood and maybe how they're becoming more political?
That's a big question.
It is. And what happens if these routine administrative tools become the basis for challenging these really important executive actions?
It's a slippery slope, potentially.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll.